Hi! Welcome to this part of my guide and review featuring the Mythic Game Master Emulator, 2nd edition. If you haven't seen the other parts of my guide and review, please check out the playlist in the description below. This time we are going to talk about when to run with expectations and when to question them. Fate questions should be asked when you aren't sure whether an expectation you have is true. The more you use Mythic to create adventures, the more you'll get a feel for when to ask a fate question and when to stick with your expectations. If you find yourself conflicted, follow your interests, consider the context of the adventure, and listen to your gut. Does it feel right to pose this detail as a fate question, or are you certain enough to take it for granted? As your adventure progresses and develops, more context fate questions and their answers will get easier and easier to come up with. Much of the narrative's richness will come from details that were fleshed out by prior fate questions. Establishing that a certain non-player character is unfriendly will shape your later expectations about that character and might impact the odds of future fate questions concerning their actions. In this way, a logical chain of events will build upon itself, shaping the structure of the adventure and spinning it into a narrative just like a game master would. In order to keep things moving in your adventure, a good rule of thumb is to try and limit yourself to no more than 2 fate questions for any one detail. That should give you enough information to reach a reasonable expectation for just about anything. If you can manage with only 1 question, so much the better. So usually you only need 1 or 2 questions to obtain enough information to make a reasonable interpretation that matches your expectations for a particular scene. Now let's talk about using Mythic as a role-playing game. You can actually use the Mythic Game Master Emulator to replace or change rules in your RPG system of choice if you don't like them. You can even forego the rules entirely and just use Mythic. You can take the mechanics in this emulator and use them to replace any rules that you don't like in your RPG system of choice. This also means that you could use Mythic to learn a system, and whenever you come up with a question or with a situation that is not covered by the rules or you don't remember the rules, you can use Mythic instead. This also means that Mythic is great if you are running an adventure with your group and you don't know how to solve a particular situation. You can use the Mythic Game Master Emulator for that. Let's talk more about this. You can ask any fate question during an adventure, even one that would normally be handled with the mechanics of your chosen RPG. If you can't recall a certain rule or haven't fully learned the game, you can use fate questions as an on-the-spot substitute, similar to the snap judgments a live game master might make to save time. You can assign odds to these fate questions based on the context of the adventure and your current understanding of the RPG's rules. Now let's talk more about chaos, events, and exceptional answers. Mythic's fate questions are intended to guide the narrative of an adventure, and the chaos factor is there to regulate that narrative. Questions like, does the kingdom have harsh laws, are narrative, story-oriented questions. The answers to them can vary depending on the chaos factor, and the chaos factor varies depending on what's happened in the adventure so far. Past narrative impacts current narrative. But when you are using fate questions to replace the rules of a role-playing game, for example combat to hit rules, recovery from damage, task resolution, etc., what matters more than the ebb and flow of narrative tension is consistency. It is suggested in these cases that you disregard the current chaos factor and treat it as a value of 5. This will give those fate questions default middle-of-the-road percentiles without the chaos factor skewing results. You should also consider whether to honor exceptional results. Unless you know that the rule you are replacing has degrees of success and failure, it may be best to treat exceptional results as regular answers. Another thing you may want to consider is ignoring random events that result from fate questions used as RPG rules. As with exceptional results, this may depend on whether the rule from your chosen RPG has a similar mechanic that allows for additional consequences. Ignoring random events in these cases are a judgment call on your part. Sometimes it may make sense to generate the random event, and sometimes it may not. And this concludes this part of the review. In the next part, we are going to talk about the big example included in this book. I think that replacing RPG rules with the Game Master emulator definitely works, but it's not my preference. I prefer to use the rules as written, depending on the RPG system, or to make some judgment calls on my own, if I don't know the rules for a particular RPG solo session. Now, when it comes to questioning expectations, I definitely agree. If you already have a clear picture in your mind of what is going to happen, then go for it. It is only when you want a bit more randomness, some surprises, or you're not exactly sure how things will proceed, then you should ask just 1 or 2 questions to get things going. Of course, you are free to ask as many questions as you want in a solo role-playing game session, but you will find that gameplay flows a bit more smooth if you don't get too bogged down on questions. Thank you for watching this part of the guide and review, and thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.